When it comes to protecting elections, Democrats in Washington are at a crossroads. Democratic senators like Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema are reluctant to reform the filibuster, even after Senate Republicans blocked a move to act on sweeping voting rights protections. They argue it promotes bipartisanship and prevents the country from swinging from one extreme to the other. But progressives in Washington are not buying it. This morning, Congressman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez pushed back against Sinema's defense of the 60-vote requirement to pass most legislation.
Why defend a 60-vote filibuster when the Senate already amplifies minority power so that the 50 Democratic senators already represent millions and millions and millions more Americans than 50 Republican senators?
And it is not just pushback from fellow lawmakers. Activists across the country are ramping up pressure, demanding action from Senate Democrats to protect ballot access. And it's not just ballot access at risk. Some states are making it legal for state legislatures to overturn an election outcome if the majority party wants to. Joining us now to discuss the push to stop the GOP assault on the right to vote, Reverend William Barber. He is the president of Repairers of the Breach and co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign. Also joining us, Pennsylvania State Representative Malcolm Kenyatta and MSNBC contributor Kimberly Atkins-Storr. She's also co-host of the hashtag Sisters-in-Law podcast. A lot to get to, Reverend Barber. I'm going to start with you. When it comes to grassroots organizing, you've led on this for years. Over the next few weeks, how are you planning to ramp up the pressure on the Senate to act on federal voting rights protections?
You know, when I was in North Carolina on Moral Monday, it took over 2 years and over 1,200 arrests and a legal battle, a legal strategy, and a voting registration strategy to beat back voter suppression. We are seeing a non-constitutional filibuster being used to block constitutional voting rights, and we can't stand for that. And people all over the country are saying we must do more than just rally now. We must nonviolently put our bodies on the line. People from all over the country are calling. When we went in Washington, D.C. last week, it was people from West Virginia and Kentucky who say Manchin is lying on them. 79% of their state wants the For the People Act, as John Lewis wrote it. They want VRA, they want living wages, and they're tired, and they're ready now to put their bodies on the line. So we're organizing and planning, I don't have all the details now, for a season of nonviolent civil disobedience, because our democracy is being threatened. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the Republicans don't want people to vote who will join together and change the economic structures and opportunities of this country. And people are coming together. They recognize this is not Jim Crow. This is James Crow Esquire. It's targeting black people and poor people and white people and brown people, indigenous and Latinos, Asian and disabled and women and young people. And the question is, which side are you on? And it's time for us to put together a season of nonviolent civil disobedience to deal with this and to change this nation. That's how we won voting rights. That's how we're going to keep voting rights. We can't separate this stuff. Voting rights, living wages, infrastructure. The same people are trying to block all of it together, and we must stand up together. It's undemocratic what they're doing. It's unconstitutional what they're doing. And the truth is, as a preacher, it's sinful what they're doing, and we can't stand for it anymore.
Well, Reverend Barber, you were talking about putting bodies on the line, so I do want to ask you, officers arrested you along with Reverend Jesse Jackson, other activists at a rally calling on Senator Manchin to end the filibuster. What exactly happened there?
Actually, when we marched, and I want to say it was the West Virginians that led us. You know, Reverend Jackson and I were there, but it was Pam Garrison and Gene Evermore and people from West Virginia and Kentucky who came to challenge McConnell and Manchin. They asked for a meeting. They were denied the meeting. We weren't allowed to get in the building, so they decided that we would put our bodies on the line and step in the street. And since that time, we've got more and more calls of people that want to join. You see, what people understand of all different races, creeds, colors, and sexualities is if this nation doesn't provide the infrastructure and living wages to lift people from the bottom, to address poverty and low wages, if we don't address the issue of voter suppression and voting rights, we are keeping the door open for the lies of Trump. And we will allow the kind of voter suppressionists to retake the Senate and state houses. And it will be at the feet if this happens, of Manchin, McConnell, and Sinema, and any Democrat or Republican who protected a non-constitutional filibuster rather than protecting the constitutional and moral principles of our democracy. This is a serious moment. This is not a small moment that we're in. And people are believing that if we got to sit in Senate offices, if we got to sit in the streets, we're not going to be insurrection. We're not going to do an insurrection. We're going to do a resurrection. We're not going to do an insurrection. We're going to do active mobilization, putting our bodies on the line all across this country and in Washington, D.C. We cannot fail in this moment.
So, Representative Kenyatta, that is the grassroots piece of this. What do you want to see progressive lawmakers do when it comes to holding their own party accountable? Representative Kenyatta, do I have you? I'm working on your audio, so while we can...
There we go.
There you are. Hi, good. Yeah.
Thanks. Reverend Barber, I said, as he always is exactly spot on. There is nothing, I repeat this all the time, there is nothing written on a tablet somewhere that guarantees America's success. And the onslaught of attacks against the right for people's voices to be heard, the right for folks to participate in the most important, the most sacred, but also the most basic responsibility that they have as citizens to be able to go to the ballot box and have their voices be heard, that is really at threat right now. And when I hear Senator Sinema and Senator Manchin say, oh, well, we have to get the permission of the arsonists to put out the fire that these folks have stoked in our democracy, that doesn't make much sense. We can't ask the very people who want to block folks from voting, is it okay if we expand access? Is it okay if we ensure that people can vote as easily, as accessibly as possible? And so what it is going to take, and it's why I'm running for the United States Senate, we've all found out that 50-50 is not much of a majority. What we need is a big, bold majority of people who understand in their bones what is at stake for working people. And working people, it turns out we can speak for ourselves, and we're speaking plainly and boldly that we need this to pass the For the People Act, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, and as I do every single day in the Pennsylvania General Assembly, stand up unabashedly against the lies and the garbage that comes out of the majority party, who happen to be the Republicans here in Pennsylvania.
So, Kimberly, obviously there are multiple tracks here, right? There's the pressure that's going to come from the grassroots. There is the organizing that's going to happen among lawmakers themselves. And then, of course, there's the part of this that I think we all have our eye on, which is what is going to happen on the legal front. So you have the Justice Department now suing Georgia under Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, arguing the state's new law intentionally targets black voters. The Supreme Court could rule on an Arizona case any day now. We are all watching for that, potentially once again weakening the Voting Rights Act. Kimberly, what are some of the uphill legal battles DOJ faces in these kinds of lawsuits?
Well, you're absolutely right. The Supreme Court next week will decide a case that decides what could make the standard even harder to prove a case of racial discrimination in voting under Section 2. We know that the Supreme Court has already gutted Section 5, which allowed the Department of Justice to preventatively stop discriminatory laws before they went into place. That's no longer there. Now all the DOJ can do is sue after the fact, which is what they're doing in Georgia. And what Attorney General Merrick Garland seemed to focus on is the fact that he is claiming, and the DOJ is claiming, that this is intentional, that these laws in Georgia are intentionally targeting black and brown people. And what we see with the Supreme Court case, while it's looking at intentional claims of intentional discrimination, it's also looking at discriminatory impact, what it takes to prove that even if it's neutral on its face, it has the effect of discriminating against black and brown people. That's the brunt of what the Supreme Court decision seemed to focus on during oral argument. So it seems the Attorney General is trying to sort of hedge a little bit to give him a way around this case. Should the Supreme Court issue a ruling that makes it difficult, it will keep that case alive, but it still could make it much more difficult to prove after the fact. It only underscores why these laws are so crucial right now, because the For the People Act and the John Lewis Act would both address the parts of the VRA that allow these cases to go forward. If lawmakers act, then these cases would go away. It would take away the need for the Supreme Court to be ruling on this. So it's a really crucial junction this coming week.
Right, as Reverend Barber said, a critical moment. Reverend Barber, Representative Kenyatta, and Kimberly, thank you all so much.